It was another remarkable day in Vaikonze at the Tata Steel Masters. Before I show you my pick of the games from round 12, I want to show you the standings after round 11. So 2 players sharing the lead. Nodirbek Andusattorov, and he was joined by Jawakhir Sindarov, his compatriot, both from Uzbekistan, and they led with 7 out of 11. Just behind them, 3 players on 6.5. Now, it's interesting, Sindarov decided to take a very quick draw against Pragyananda. So that left him just ahead on 7.5. An interesting practical decision. So Andusattorov knew that if he won, then he would leapfrog Sindarov and go back into the lead. Now Andusattorov was playing white against Matthias Bluebaum, who is just half a point behind. So this was a really tense game. Andusattorov in fantastic form. He just crushed it at the London Chess Classic. Matthias Bluebaum in the form of his life. He's qualified for the candidates. And in this tournament, he's crossed over the 2700 barrier for the very first time. And this was a superb game. Let's take a look and see what happened in Nodirbek Andusattorov against Matthias Bluebaum. Andusattorov opened with c4, but it very quickly went into a queen's gambit. Knight f6 and the exchange variation. And if you recall, Matthias Bluebaum had exactly this opening against Vincent Keymer. He won a really nice game against Vincent earlier in the tournament, and it's running along the same lines. But at this point, here is where Keymer played with knight f3, but instead Andusattorov plays knight e2. So just slightly different. c6 and queen c2 and knight d7. So this is quite a standard position. Now, if you castle here, then black usually plays knight h5. So you can see that that bishop is kind of trapped. It's going to be exchanged off one way or the other. And this is actually a reasonable way for black to play, because once those bishops are exchanged, then the queen actually gets to a decent square, and there's a bit of congestion is relieved in black's position. Andusattorov played, instead of castles, he played h3. And one of the ideas is that if black goes for this simplification, then you can go onto the attack straight away with g4 and castles queenside. So Bluebaum played instead knight f8, a pretty normal move. So the bishop is freed, the knight stands pretty well on f8. There are other ways to play this position. I mean, one can play, for example, with a5 or b5. It's quite reasonable. But okay, knight f8. And then bishop g3. And Bluebaum plays knight e6. I have to say, I think I would play bishop d6 here to just try and exchange off that bishop. But knight e6 is a kind of normal move. But the problem is that after castles, bishop d6, that bishop sinks itself on e5. So the knight blocks the rook, and white is ready to follow up with f4 potentially. And that's kind of what happened. Bluebaum exchanged, played the knight back, and then f4. So this is already a very risky approach that Bluebaum is taking, because it's allowed white the beautiful e and f pawns that could just roll down the board, and it might gain a tempo on that knight on e6. But he played knight c5. So there is counterplay, because this knight looks at the bishop and looks at this important square. A check, getting the bishop out of the way. And then the knight was pushed back, b4. And if the knight comes back to d3, then bishop d3. I mean, this is already a sharp position, because black can actually take a pawn. you can see that both those pawns are attacked. White would have to sacrifice a pawn, but has pretty good comp in the form of this attack. Anyway, Bluebaum played instead knight f8. He's determined to take that bishop. So if it scoots back here, then it'll be exchanged off. So the knight was taken. Knight takes. Now black wants to play f6 to open up the e-file. So it's vital that white reacts quickly here. And Andusattorov, well, he's not afraid to take the initiative. He played e4. And this is not looking good for black. Because if that's exchanged off, woof, once that knight reaches d6, that is an octopus and a half. Octopus alert. And, you know, if you try something like this, well, it's not going to help. The second knight comes in. And that is fantastic. Just compare these two pieces. The knight coming into d6 and that knight on h7, which has nowhere to go. So let's go back. Bluebaum played queen a5. Okay, good move. He's got to fight back. E takes d5. Queen takes c5, check. King h1. C takes d5. And you can see that actually Bluebaum has a pawn up. And, well, the ranks have been cleared a little bit. This knight still isn't very good, but it's a rather unclear position. I mean, white has so many ways to play this. You know, where do you play this rook? Do you put it on c1, d1? Where do you move the queen to? Do you put it on b3, b2, d3, d2? It's really hard to say. Queen d2 played by Andusattorov. Bishop d7, so prepares to bring the rook into the game. I mean, white obviously has compensation here because these pawns are really nice. But, you know, black has connected the rooks. Pieces don't look too bad. I mean, this knight could hop back into the game via f8 or, you know, maybe via g5 if this pawn advances. I mean, it's not advancing at the moment because of that. So it's rather double-edged. If white wants to take it easy, then of course it's possible to recapture the pawn. But that doesn't look too bad for black. You know, this bishop is going to find a good square. But it's just an indication. If Andusattorov wanted a draw, he could simplify. But no, he was definitely playing for a win. Well, you can see it over the next couple of moves. So queen b2, attacking this one. Bluebaum just put the queen in the way. No queen exchange, came back. Queen a5, they repeated the position. So if Andusattorov wants to draw, then queen b2 is good enough. It's clear that Bluebaum was happy. But no, he wanted to play for a win, and very quickly he played knight d4. 1 minute. f6 played. So this really just increases the tension because, I mean, this might be very, very good for black. It could be very bad. You know, if these pawns are exchanged, the knight comes back into the game and it might plonk itself on e4 at some point. And black, I mean, it supports the d pawn as well. Black is looking very healthy there. On the other hand, it does expose the king a little bit. Queen b2 played. Now, queen b6 is no longer very good because of this. I mean, this is a remarkable tactic, actually. White could exchange, give that one, and then there isn't really a good defense to knight c7. There are just too many pieces going to land in that fork. In any case, after queen b2, Bluebaum took the pawn on e5. So now he's 2 pawns up. 2 pawns up. This is looking really tricky. But then rook f7 came, attacking the bishop. So the rook lands on the 7th rank. The knight came back into the game, knight f6. And then rook f1. Now, it was at this moment that Bluebaum played queen c7, which covers b7 and also covers the bishop to some extent. Okay, here's where I'd like you to have a think. I'm going to have a drink. So what would you play here with white? A little bit of calculation would be good. Good luck. White to play. See you after this. Do you want to improve your chess? Get access to live masterclasses with yours truly? Then subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess, and for just $25 a month, you get a newsletter with a test game, calculation puzzles, a monthly opening survey, access to an archive with over 100 opening surveys. And you can join in live masterclasses exclusive to patrons where you can ask me questions directly over Zoom. All for only $25 per month. Do subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess and join the club. In fact, queen c7 was a blunder. Andusattorov leapt in with knight b5. So there's a pin here. So that can't be captured. And the queen just does not have a good square to go to. Let me give you a couple of examples. If queen a5, then this rook is now loose. Knight c6 is really strong. And queen takes. And basically, white is breaking through there. You can see that. What else we got? What about queen d8? Well then, knight d6 is fantastically strong. You can see that this knight is getting ready to land on f7. And there isn't really a good defense to that. So, knight here takes, knight f7 check, and that's winning. Bluebaum played queen c4, which doesn't look bad because it does hit a lot of pieces. I mean, obviously the rook on f1, but even the knights as well. You'd think reasonable chance. But then rook takes knight. Pawn takes. Now, got to be a little bit careful here with white, because if you take that bishop, then queen f1 check gives black a really strong counterattack after this. And rook g8. Got to be really careful. But instead, white throws in queen f2, threatening a huge check on f6. So that has to be covered. It's not so easy to cover it actually, but a check here, and then queen g5 does cover it. But now white is free to play rook takes d7. So after that little flurry, white has two knights against rook and two pawns. However, you can see the king is exposed on the 7th rank. White's king is a lot happier, and these knights are about to float into the attack. So rook e4, knight d6. Not a lot could be done about that one. Queen check, g3. So white threatens to check here. And there really is no good defense. I mean, if king g8, this one comes in, you can see this is looking absolutely desperate. The queen goes with check, for example. So queen takes knight played, but then knight takes rook. Exchange of queens. So Andusattorov was a knight up. Okay, he's still got to clean up, but actually with the rook on the 7th, cutting the king, this is very simple. And the game finished like this. Rook takes a2 and knight g4. Here Bluebaum resigned. Reasonable decision. White threatens knight f6, followed by a mate on h7. And if rook a6, then you can start picking up pawns. You can pick up that one. You can come back and pick up that one. And okay, you can see that it's a very, very easy win for white with the extra knight. Well, that was a pretty brave game by Nodirbek Andusattorov. I think, all the way along, he really pushed it. I think, in particular, round about this point, when it's clear that it hadn't quite gone as well as he'd hoped, but he kept finding ways to play on to sort of cause trouble. Incidentally, in this position, instead of queen c7, it would have been better to play, for example, rook c8, bring the rook into play, and then bring the queen back. And well, white still has very good compensation, but black is basically holding there. I mean, there were various moments for improvements for both sides, but this is the major one, really. Queen c7 is a blunder. Okay, well, let's take a look at the standings after round 12. I mean, it really was another cutthroat day at the Tata Steel Masters. Vincent Keimer won again. I mean, he's had such an up and down tournament. So anyway, let's look at the standings. So Andusattorov out in front with 8. Javakir Sindarov on 7.5. And then we have Niemann, Keimer and Van Foreest on 7. I mean, they could still be in with a shout. But let's look at the last round pairings. This is absolutely crucial. What's interesting is that all 5 of those players are playing with black in the last round. So, top pairing. Arjun Erigaisi faces Nodirbek Andusattorov. So Andusattorov, well, I mean, who knows what he's going for? Whether he plays for a draw or whether he pushes it, who knows? And then we have Sindarov has black against Taidai Van Nguyen, who's at the bottom of the tournament. So does he have a chance to push there? And then the others, well, not an easy one. Niemann has Giri, Keimer has Gukesh, and Van Foreest has Pragnananda. So it's going to be an absolutely fascinating last round. Remember, the action starts 2 hours earlier at the Tata Steel Masters. So anyway, I will be reporting back and I will see you soon.